Jesus film is the most widely viewed film in history, according to the New York Times. We've had over 8 billion views of the Jesus film in almost every country on earth, both with local showings in the field or theater showings or what I work on, which is broadcast for television, and then the radio version for radio all around the world. 60% of all new church plants in the world involve a showing of the Jesus film. So I would say that Jesus film is probably the most effective evangelism tool that has ever been created. And it's done just an enormous amount for bringing people to faith in Christ and helping them to have a historical context for understanding who he is. For someone who's never seen the Jesus film before, it is a movie about the life of Christ. It's the most realistic depiction of the life of Christ ever put to film. More people have seen the Jesus film than have seen any other film in history. 60% of all, I think I said this before, 60% of all new church plants in the world happen as a result of a Jesus film showing. It really is just the life of Christ, word for word, from the Gospel of Luke, telling his story and why it's important that you and I know about him and how that impacts our life and the decision that we have to make about who God is and how that was expressed by Jesus.
Why do you think it is that it has been so effective? Is it because it is pure Scripture?
I think so. You know, there are a lot of movies out there about the life of Jesus, some which are just made up out of whole cloth and some which try to follow the spirit of the story of Jesus. But the Jesus film was the first film, if I'm not mistaken, that literally went word for word from the Bible and told the story completely true to the text of the Bible without needing to add any additional narration or made-up dialogue or anything of that nature. It's just purely the story of Jesus. I think God honors his own word, and when we honor him in telling others about him according to his word, he makes that effective for evangelism. And that's why I think the Jesus film is so successful.
Now, it's in all these languages.
Over 2,000.
Some people will say, well, do you have that many actors? How does that work?
Yeah, we do translation of the Jesus film into all of these different languages all around the world. Every major language in the world is covered, and many, many hundreds of tribal and other smaller languages are covered as well. And we're continuing to translate into those other languages so that people can hear the story of Jesus in their own heart language so that it can speak to them. I work in the area of broadcast for Jesus film. Our goal since 2016 has been to air the Jesus film on television all around the world in multiple languages so that everybody can have a chance to say yes to Jesus. Our goal has been since 2016 to see over 1.3 billion people touched by the Jesus film on television and radio all around the world. So far, at the time of our discussion right now in 2022, we've had just over 1,020 million views of the Jesus film in all of those languages all around the world, and representing over 150 countries so far. So we're well on our way to meeting that goal. The thing that is so transformative is to hear how God has used the film by broadcast in ways that we never imagined. So, for instance, I did an email contact to all of our national directors with Campus Crusade for Christ International to talk about upcoming opportunities to put the Jesus film on television in their countries. And in one of those countries, which is still communist-controlled, the director there said, I've been praying for a broadcast opportunity in Vietnam for 20 years, so perhaps God will give us favor. So he then approached the government officials that ran the TV station there on state TV, and they said yes, that they would allow them to air the Jesus film on TV. They not only aired the Jesus film during the Christmas holiday last year, but the people at the station were so enamored with the film, they said, can we show it again? And so they did. And then they came up with the Magdalena film, which is the women's version of the Jesus film, for International Women's Day earlier this year on March 8th. And they showed the film, and then they showed it again. And the end result of those things is between those two showings, over 10 million people got to see the story of the life of Jesus that have most likely never heard the gospel before.
And when you see God opening doors that way, What does that do for you personally in your work with the ministry?
Oh, man, it charges me up, because what I care about is I want people to know the story of Jesus. I've been involved with radio and TV ministry since 1983, when I first got into Christian radio and in the United States. And then I've been involved in work all around the world, in Asia, the Middle East, and whatnot. And for me, it's all about who is Jesus, what did he do, why did he do it, and what should our response be? I want people to fall in love with Jesus the way I've fallen in love with Jesus because of what he did for us. And everybody needs to hear the gospel, to know that story, so that they can have a chance to know him and have a chance to say yes. And the neat thing about this is, there are some countries in the world where before you make a decision for Christ, you may need to hear the gospel an average of 40 or 45 times before you'll make that decision, especially in really risky countries in the world. But when you show the Jesus film, it does more than give you a little 5-minute presentation of the gospel. It tells his story in an historical context so that people can understand exactly who he is. And when you do that, you fill up the measure of what people need to see or hear about the story of Jesus to make that decision. And the end result is that something like over 480 million people have made a commitment to Christ since the Jesus film was launched over 50 years ago. Really, really remarkable.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are there certain people groups where the Jesus film is the only film that's ever been made in their language?
There are, though I don't know what those groups are, to be honest with you, but there are. I remember I was involved in Mongolia for 10 years. I ran a TV station there, and the first Western film ever shown in Mongolia was the Jesus film.
You mentioned Mongolia.
Mm-hmm.
Take us there.
Well,
how did you wind up there, and what did you do?
Well, I've been working for Campus Crusade for Christ for a number of years on broadcast strategy, and I was asked to go to Mongolia to run a television station there called Eagle TV. It was a cooperative effort between a group of American Christian businessmen and Mongolian Democrats, and the station was floundering. They were having some trouble. This is back in 2002. And so they asked me if I would consider taking over the station for a couple of years, get it running well again, train a manager, and then go. And I thought, 2 years, I can do 2 years in Mongolia. Most people don't think about Mongolia. It's kind of a hard place to live in some respects, especially because of the weather. It's minus 35 degrees all the time. It's kind of crazy. But I thought it would be a good opportunity. And when I was told that over 95% of the population had never heard the gospel even one time, I knew immediately I have to go there, because I want everyone on earth to have a chance to say yes to Jesus. So my wife and my 3 daughters and I, in 2002, we moved to Mongolia and took over the management of Eagle Television. And I ended up staying there for 10 years because the ministry kept growing and growing and growing in influence. We saw thousands of people come to faith in Christ. Through our video strategy in the countryside, we planted 50 new church groups, and the Lord just did an enormous task. We had Bible movies. You may be familiar with some of these Bible movies from the 1990s: Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, David, Solomon, Esther, Jeremiah. We used those movies to do Bible storytelling in a chronological way through television. And the end result was that many people got to see not only the story of Jesus, but the story of the Bible for the first time. I had a Southern Baptist doctor who was a missionary in Mongolia come to me one day, and he says, "Do you know how easy you've made my ministry?" He says, "Almost every doctor, nurse, and patient that I share my faith with tell me the same thing. They tell me, 'Oh, this is about the Bible.' I know about the Bible. I watch Eagle TV's Bible movies." And he planted a church there in the hospital made up of doctors, nurses, and patients. So the Lord gave us enormous opportunities to share the gospel in Mongolia through television, and many people's lives were changed as a result.
Any story from your time in Mongolia where you knew God was doing something and that it was him? It was not, man's strategy. It wasn't a particular project. It was just God showed up and did an amazing work.
Well, one of my favorite stories is one that happened in a Mongolian countryside community where there was an elderly woman who had come to Christ, and she wanted to have a Bible. you couldn't just go down to the local bookstore and go buy a Bible in the countryside of Mongolia. They didn't exist out there. We would have to transport Bibles to take them to different places. So our field ministry team was in this community one day, and they were talking with her, and she said she had been praying, God, would you please provide me with a Bible? And she's walking down the street one day, and she has to go to the bathroom. And so she finds a public outhouse. Now, when I say public outhouse, you need to think in those terms of a dirty, disgusting, smelly, awful thing to go into. So she goes in there, and she looks down the hole, and she sees that there's a book down there in that hole amidst all the muck and the mire. And she kind of looks closely, and she realizes it's a Bible. So she takes apart the seat, and she gets down, and she reaches down in there, and she grabs that Bible, which is covered with just filth, and she takes it home, and she cleans it up, and that becomes her Bible. And she brought that Bible to the field team that was there and showed them that Bible. God is moving in Mongolia in ways that we could never imagine. I mean, how many of us here in America, or maybe many other countries around the world, would say, oh yeah, I got my Bible out of a toilet. That's my precious Bible. We're going to kind of leave it there and hope to get something nice at the bookstore or order on Amazon. But that's not what happened with this woman. She was just so happy to see a Bible that she had to have it for herself, no matter where it came from. And that was life-changing for her.
And literally, that is her treasure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I want to talk about, I can see your excitement as you're sharing this story. Talk to someone who is maybe feeling a pull to missions, but is saying, I don't know. I don't know that we can take our family over there. I can see by what you saw on the mission field, it is exciting.
Yeah, yeah.
Talk to someone today who might be sensing a call to the mission field, but is maybe fearful about it.
Well, I like to use the illustration of investment. When you invest financially in something, when is the best time to invest? It's when the cost is low and the return is high. That's the best time to invest. That is true with the Great Commission right now. There has never been a better time in the history of the world to be involved with the Great Commission than right now. More people and more countries are open to the gospel right now than ever before in history. More things are happening for the gospel right now than have ever happened before. The gospel is available literally to every country on earth through all forms of media, as one example: radio, television, internet, print, all kinds of opportunities to share the gospel with people in many ways. When you get involved in the Great Commission, you are involved in the very heart of God, wanting to reach people for Christ and to use you to be able to do that. There are more missionaries serving right now in every country on earth than there have ever been in history. In fact, get this, statistically, the number of people who are hearing the gospel is outpacing population growth on the earth by 2 to 1. More people hear the gospel every year than die every year, almost to basically 2 to 1. What does that mean? Well, if you ran the numbers, it's very simplistic, but if you ran the numbers, what you discover is by 2029, every person on earth will have heard the gospel at least one time, if the current trends continue. Let me say that again. If the current trends continue, every person on earth will have heard the gospel at least one time by 2029. 2029 is not that far away. It's just a few years away. Imagine getting involved with the Great Commission somewhere in the world, whether it's your neighborhood or halfway around the earth, getting involved in leading people to Christ and discipling them to fall in love with Jesus. You're part of changing the world. And now is the best time to get involved, better than it's ever been.
I would like for you to comment on Luke chapter 10. This is verse 2. You know it well. The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest.
Well, imagine if that was true in Jesus' day 2,000 years ago, then what could it be like right now? Between all of the advantages of the world's wealth to use to spread the gospel, of the number of people, there are over 400,000 missionaries of all stripes in the world today, more so than has ever been ever in the history of the world. the harvest is happening right now in ways that we have never seen before. And so to me, if you're going to get involved with the Great Commission, jump in now while the getting is good, because it's really good.
What about those who say, what about my family, my kids? I don't know that I want to raise my kids on a foreign mission field.
Yeah, my wife and I, we took our 3 daughters to Mongolia in 2002 to take over the TV station there. And, like any family situation, when you step into the unknown of something, you kind of get nervous about it and you wonder, am I doing the right thing? My daughters were 12 and under when we moved to Mongolia. And we spent 10 years there. And so my kids, most of their memories, you know how kids are, most of your memories are when you're in your preteen to teen years. You tend to forget a lot of things when you were younger. That's kind of normal. So my girls, they grew up in Mongolia, and most of their life memories are from Mongolia. You ask all 3 of my girls today where their true home is, all 3 of them say, Mongolia is my true home. You never know what you're going to encounter when you move to another country or another culture. If you're living in obedience and love to Jesus Christ, and you go do what he wants you to do, he will help you take care of the rest. He did that with our girls. They loved being in Mongolia. All of their greatest relationships came from Mongolia. My second daughter, Rochelle, married another missionary kid from Mongolia, and they are permanently part of our lives. So I would say, if God is calling you, step out, take the risk, and even if you make a mistake or a wrong decision at first, that's okay. God can work that out with you, and you'll see him do remarkable works when you give yourself over to love and service of him.
Before even you can get to that remarkable work, you've got to raise support. A lot of people are thinking, we could never raise support to go be a missionary somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because I think most missionaries go through that doubting process of, how in the world am I going to ask people for money? People don't like it when you ask for money. Here's the secret of raising support. Everybody wants you to ask them for money. Now, that sounds counterintuitive, but the reality is that most people, not everyone, but most people want to be involved in something that is bigger than themselves. When I go into our support bases and I talk to people about our ministry, people get involved because they see that we're involved in something that's bigger than ourselves, that's bigger than them, and they get to have a piece of that when they give that support. And so that becomes exciting for people. So when you first launch and you start on raising your own support, know that what you're doing is you're not just asking people for money. You're asking people to be involved with the Great Commission and to step out in faith with you as you take the funds that they give you and put feet to that and make that happen in that country of your choice.
Would you not say that it's even natural for believers to want to be involved somehow in missionary work around the world?
I think so. Many people don't get involved in missions because of fear, whether it's sharing your faith with your neighbor or somebody at work or a family member, or actually going out to somewhere around the world and spreading the gospel. Fear can be a big thing. There's always the fear of the unknown. Here's the thing. We don't know the future because we haven't been there yet. But God knows the future, and he knows your future. And your future is not something that happens by happenstance. It's a future in which your steps are ordered by God as you submit yourself to live for him at any cost. God is intimately involved. He's not saying, go and do this and I'll be waiting back over here for you. It doesn't work that way. It's as you say yes to go, God goes with you and you follow in his footsteps what he is doing in that part of the world.
You mentioned early on partnerships. Talk to us about the value of partnerships in fulfilling the Great Commission.
Well, this is a big thing for Campus Crusade for Christ, also known as Cru in the United States, and with Jesus Film Project, with whom I work. Partnerships are vital to sharing the gospel. Without partnerships, we would be reaching fewer people. Many years ago, missions leaders from all around the world got together to try to figure out how can we fulfill the Great Commission in our time. And what they came up with was partnership ideas of working together to be able to reach people for Christ. So, this little discussion that you and I are having right now is a great example of a partnership. I'm sitting here in the Transworld Radio studios talking to you. You work for TWR. I work for Jesus Film Project. There are certain things that TWR does for Jesus Film to make our radio broadcast possible. And there are certain things that I involved with Jesus Film and doing for TWR to help make more of your work possible. If we didn't have that relationship, we would be less effective in sharing the gospel. But because we have that relationship and we partner together, more people's lives can be changed as a result.
Anything else you want to add? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, to me, everything about the Great Commission is about one thing. It's about loving Christ. It's about getting others to fall in love with Christ just as you have. That's really the bottom line. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength. God's designed us in His image. He wants us to do the things He does, to feel the things He feels, and to think the things that He thinks about. And so it all begins in the mind when you fall in love with God, when you come to a realization of who He is and what He wants you to do with your life. You love Him with the mind by thinking through those things. You love Him in your heart when you make a decision to follow Him. And you love Him in your strength, in all of your expressions when you step out in faith and obey Him to share Him with others.
Speaking of someone who's been in full-time ministry for decades to someone else who has been in ministry for decades, are there times when those of us in full-time Christian work get lost in being more of a worker or a servant rather than a child who is in love with their Heavenly Father?
Yeah, happens all the time. We are, some of us, probably the best way to put this is that most missionaries I know, and I've known missionaries not just with Crusade, but with other ministries all around the world, most people that I know that are involved in ministry are performance-driven. They want to accomplish something for God that is greater than themselves. They spend inordinate amount of time working on ministry projects to the point where it becomes work and not just ministry, or not something that is a natural outflowing of your heart. I was just talking with a guy yesterday who was expressing the same thing. We're out on a walk together, and he goes, everything for me is about performance. And, I kind of feel that same way too. But the reality is that whether Jesus said that you're going to sow the seed, and some you're going to sow is going to be 30, and some 60%, and some 100%. I'm the kind of guy that goes, I want to be 1,000,000% guy. I just want to be an overachiever for Christ. The reality is that you cannot overachieve God, but that does not mean that you shut out every other part of your life so that you only do that one thing. Because you may still have a family that needs your attention and friends that need ministering to. And sometimes you got to take a break and get away for a little bit just to refresh. You got to take a vacation. So you want to be careful about being, performance-driven. You want to be love-driven. But I'll be honest, the more you fall in love with Jesus, the more you're going to want to express who He is to other people, because that is just the natural outgrowth of a love relationship. It's like my wife and I. I want people to know my wife. I love my wife. She's everything to me, and I want people to know that. And it's the same thing, but even greater with Jesus. If you love Jesus, if you really love Jesus, you will want others to know Him, and you'll want to be a part of helping others to know Him.